Let me turn on the recording now, so we're good to go. And the new planning director is going to join us. He left the office about 4:30, 4:35, so he'll probably be rolling in home in Connecticut after we've started.
Well, that's fine. I think we should get going because I know that Brian has limited time and we have a number of things on the agenda. So I'd like to, acting as the chair, I'm Richard Youngkin. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 5:37 p.m. on November 5th, 2020. And we'll have a roll call. If you just bear with me a moment. Andrew Martinez.
Present.
Shanti Anderhagen.
Present.
Karen De Silva.
Present.
Carolyn Griswold.
Present.
And Linda Stedman. Linda's on mute, so you'll have to unmute, Linda.
I'm here.
Good, thank you. All right, absent is Jim Garfield. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of September 10th, 2020, the draft minutes.
Can I make an edit to those? Sorry, there's a puppy in the background. I wasn't present at the September meeting and it shows me as being present.
Okay.
Correct. That should be, I think that's definitely legitimate.
And my first name is incorrect. It should be Shantia.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. Do you want a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, I make that motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion, any further discussion?
I have one other comment about 5B and the revolving fund. I think basically we didn't do anything and we just shunted it to our next meeting. And so we didn't really do a report and discussion, did we?
No,
Remember?
I think as I remember it, we raised the idea or the thought that because the planning staff, Kayla Gray in particular, was interested in this in previous meetings, and that the staff has now changed, that this actually originated with staff input and staff interest. And there was a discussion going on with the town manager and the staff about a town effort to involve a nonprofit to get interested in this. So I think what we said last time was simply that we were waiting for the current staff, the new staff, and the new town manager to get together and to discuss this and come back to us if there was renewed interest in this. It really revolves around something that the staff was getting interested in.
I see it's on page 121 of the master plan, the final draft we received.
So I guess Andrew's pointing that out, that it's in the comprehensive plan that we received and as a draft, and that of course follows from probably those discussions that Kayla would have had with the town manager prior to Brian and Mr. Rabbit coming on board. So
I can read it to those of you who don't have it handy right now. Action 2.3. This is page 121. Explore and determine the costs and benefits of establishing a revolving loan fund for owners of historic buildings and actively reach out to owners to encourage them to take advantage of this and other financial and technical assistance available to them to keep their properties well maintained.
yeah, that's very good. So why don't we do this? Why don't we could leave we could just have a note in terms of an amendment to the minutes that said that we discussed the town and the staff interest in this, and we were awaiting further input from them in terms of renewed interest, considering the staff has changed.
Mhm.
Okay,
I think-
I can make those changes.
Any other items to discuss? All right, should we have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think that's all ayes. I think when we have votes from now on in the rest of the meeting, we'll do
Hands.
it by roll call. All right, so the minutes are approved. And now we have correspondence and any public comments. Do we have anybody in the public in the waiting room?
Nope.
Okay. So we have, unfortunately, and sort of, it's one of those things. Jim has decided to resign. And we have an email from him dated the 28th of October, 2020. And I spoke to him on the phone. It's kind of sad, but he did remind me that it's been 35 years. That's why I say maybe it's not so sad. It's a celebration in a way of his longevity and his incredible interest. So I think even though we could ask him to reconsider, it's probably not the wise thing to do. And it's so fabulous to have had a member on this board for 35 years. He said that's half his lifetime.
Wow.
Well, so with regret, I think we have to accept his resignation. And I was going to say that I don't know if I can continue, to chair these meetings. So I think it would be kind of neat to consider for perhaps the next meeting to have another set of elections to perhaps elect a new chair to follow in his footsteps. If you all will consider that. And we can have a little bit of discussion about that now, but I thought that would be a good thing to do.
Mm.
So Shanti's saying yes.
Oh,
And
we need a
Karen?
chair.
Yeah, not to be the chair. Well, I won't put you in that spot.
No,
But I
no, I
wanna
said
hear
we
from-
need a chair.
Yeah, yeah.
Need a chair.
And Karen is on mute. I don't know what she's doing. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do need a chair.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And the thing is that I tend to talk too much, so it's kind of better to have a chair that isn't like yattering away all the time. How about you, Linda?
I agree we need a chair, but I don't want to be one.
Ah, okay. I'm fine with continuing as a vice chair if that's, but we may want to, reconsider all the positions. I don't know. But let's just put it on hold until
Yep.
the next meeting, and so we can cogitate over it.
All right.
And then there is also, we have also, which is not on the agenda, but Carolyn has written in with an email today saying that she is thinking that the Zoom meetings do not do so well for her, and that she'd like to not be reappointed. And maybe Carolyn, you can say something about that.
Well, that's basically how I feel. I'm in the dark, and I don't feel I communicate very well this way.
Yeah. Well, you have.
And my appointment was up for renewal anyway, so I notified Brian this morning and dropped off my letter saying not to reconsider me for another appointment. So,
Well, it's understandable, but you have been fabulous, and it's been wonderful to have you on the board. And I'm so sorry about all the COVID stuff, and it is difficult.
well, we all are.
Yeah, we all are.
Nobody's.
It isn't easy. And you will be continuing, I think, I'm not sure, maybe Brian can help us with this, but I'm not sure if you continue until the position is reappointed or how that works. But
No, I think it's just ended.
ended.
Yeah.
So if we have another meeting in December, you will attend, but
Richard,
probably-
if I may, she can continue to participate. We've had other committees that have, the members have agreed to stay on until they're replaced, but it's totally up to the participant.
Yeah, I would have to check on the town's rules about that. I mean, certainly she's welcome to stay and participate. My only question would be about her eligibility to participate in any voting.
Well, my feeling is basically I would prefer not to under these circumstances. If we were having in-person meetings, then it would be one thing, but I'm not going to do this.
All right, very good. Well, thank you.
Being old and crotchety.
Thank you for being who you are, Robin, and thank you so much for all your help and
Well, and you
staying
too
with us.
as well. Yes, thank you.
It's been terrific. And you'll still be invited to go sailing.
Oh, thank you.
We had to take a break from that, but I hope
We need a bigger boat if we're going to social distance.
Yeah. Or I'll put somebody in the dinghy.
We've already been in the dinghy.
All right, moving on. Let the minutes actually express some gratitude for both Jim and Carolyn and our good thoughts about them. Both. So there's a memorandum to the planning board that it's a September 10th, 2020 memo to the planning board. That's been accepted. It's here. You've all probably clicked on it and read it. I don't know if you have any comments concerning that. Is everybody okay with that memo? It sort of reflects both meetings where we discussed it.
I thought it looked good. I thought it was a nice memo.
Good. And Brian, maybe if you're on mute there, Brian, but maybe you can just tell us very briefly where the project is right now.
The project got, and I beg your pardon, but I'm trying to fix that link issue so that Mr. Harrington and Jamie can get in. So I'll
all right.
try and multitask here a little bit.
We'll let you go then. Don't worry about it.
But the status of that is that it got all of its approvals from the town council on the things that it needed approval for. And the last we heard from the developer, he was getting slowed down with financing issues because apparently people are currently reluctant to loan money out on hospitality projects in the middle of the pandemic.
Oh, well, that makes total sense.
So it's not dead, but it may be slowed down quite a bit until he can get the financing that he needs.
All right. So I think then we can move on to old business. What we may want to do is wait for Mr. Harrington to arrive before we discuss his project, if that's going to happen. Otherwise, we'll just continue it to the next meeting. And then under old business, we do have a revolving loan fund subcommittee. Maybe we've already discussed that in the minutes. I don't know if anybody wants to discuss that any further. Certainly when when James Rabbit comes on board to the meeting, we can raise it with him and come back to it. and also when we discuss the comprehensive plan update.
Well, Rich, I was going to actually ask if, since the comprehensive plan update looks like it's in its final edit stage, it seems to me that if there isn't interest in pursuing that, that probably needs to come out of the comprehensive plan,
Correct. Although
right?
it's possible within 2 months, somebody will have an interest in it. It's one of those things that I felt that the staff and Mr. Rabbit needed to come up to speed on, and they
Yeah.
will see.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just thinking it has to probably happen. I don't know what the track for the comprehensive plan is in terms of, these final edits. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe there's plenty of time, but if there isn't, does there need to be a meeting?
No, the track for the comprehensive plan is a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yeah, I would recommend that we just leave it alone, and it's, one of those items that they may not even get to, but at least it's there. If they,
right, okay.
Ah, there we go. All right. 1 and 2. All right, so we have Mr. Rabbit, who I believe sounded like he was still on the phone in his car, and Mr. Harrington.
I am on the phone in my car. Sorry.
Good. Well, and Mr. Harrington is on board.
Yes. There he is.
Hello, Matt. You're on mute.
Yes, I didn't want to. I didn't want to talk out of turn.
Well, we have reached the point in our agenda for your project review.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna. Are you okay? Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
Let me just read some things into the minutes so
Yep.
that we have the preamble. This is a certificate of appropriateness for 2557 Kingstown Road, Assessor's Plat 23-3, Lot 45. It's a continuation of an application that came in previously. We looked at it last in September, and the application was divided into parts. Some of the requests were approved and given a certificate of appropriateness. This remaining request has to deal with the enframement for the front door of the house and concerns about the pilasters, which are on either side of the door that have rotten bases and need to be replaced. And originally, Mr. Harrington thought that the replacement in kind was fine. Then there was some interest in whether or not the details were not accurate of the doorway as it is now. So the project was deferred and has been deferred, I think, for at least 2 meetings, or continued to 2 meetings, with trying to get some more research. And if Matt Harrington has got some more research, that would be fine. I did some more research and I can share that as well. So Matt, maybe you can enlighten us now on what you've been able to discover, if anything.
Nothing. Other than the photo, I did talk to someone at the Narragansett Times about going through their archives, because it's my wife's idea. Our kids were photographed in front of the door at one of the Kingston fairs, and in June of, she thinks 5 years old. So her idea was she was going to go down there and go through their archives, because it was on the front page of the paper. Oh. And she's going to try to figure, she said it's got to be either June 1999 or June 1998. She was going to try to go down there and do that and see if that photo
right
was there.
Was she successful at all? Was she?
What's that?
Was she successful? Did she?
She didn't get a chance. It was something she thought of about 2 weeks ago, and so didn't get a chance.
Well,
And
why don't I share what I've come up with, and maybe that will help us, and then we'll ask any of the other members if they have discovered anything as well. Shanti, I'd like to thank you too for raising this at the last meeting and asking us to think it through a little bit. What I did was I went through my photographs of Kingston, of the federal period houses. And I wish I'd done this before, Matt. What I found out was significantly that a great number of them have these pilasters either side of the door, very much like you have on your door now.
Yeah.
And it seems to be a very common feature for these things to be framed up with moldings and maybe have a centerpiece that's a little bit raised out. But I found at least 4 or 5 houses between Kingstown Road and Old North Road in the federal style that have the same type of door enframement. So we come full circle in this research, and I think I'm about to say that you should go ahead and replace it in kind and keep those features that are on the pilasters as they now are. I also found, if you want it, I found a photograph that I took. It's got to be 10 years ago, which is a very good photograph of the front door. And I have to say that in our standards and guidelines, the same picture shows up. And with the name, with the 2557 above it, and it shows clearly sort of the design of those pilasters beside your front door. So
I was betting exactly the opposite.
What was that? We seem to have lost.
He froze.
Froze.
Yep.
Where are we? Do you have any other comment? Anybody else have any other comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, Jamie Rabbit, Planning
Yes.
Director, if I may.
Yes.
And thank you for working with Brian and working with the landowner on this one. I just wanted to say, Brian Wagner asked me to take a quick look at it. I have a little bit of background dealing with architecture review and historic district commissions, and I would concur with your analysis. And actually, if you look at your own design guidelines, there's 5 examples within that document, including the cover page, that shows the same geometry and proportionality associated with that type of entry treatment. And I think what's different amongst the homes in the district is that you had different price points. So there's an example on your cover page, there's an example on page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 5. And Brian has my notes, so if I missed a page, Brian, please speak up.
Yeah.
And what you'll see is you'll see those pilasters. Some are fluted, some are trimmed out, but they're all prominent. All those doors that I referenced and entryways all have a center transom. Some are 4-pane, some are 3-pane. 2557's a 3-pane transom. And then if you look at the portionality above the transom, you have 3 other existing houses in the district with that identical proportionality. The difference being is that some of those doorways above the transom add some bracketing and a little more protection to the trim aspects. And I think that's based on the price point for the owner of the house when they worked on the finishes. But I would agree with you that architecture exists in the district and replicating it would be appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Rabbit. We can call you Jamie. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Thank you very much. And you distilled that down pretty well for us. And so we're operating under our guideline. I believe it's I keep shuffling my papers here, but I believe it's 43, having to do with
Yes, 43,
entrances.
43.
So we want to keep that in mind as we pursue this. Are there any other comments from the board?
I took a look at it today, just to see it firsthand, because I know we had talked about how much of this material was replaced by the carpenter a few years ago. And I also just looked at it from the perspective of whether I thought it looked original in its architectural design. So I'm totally in agreement with the direction we're going in, that this is, likely a reproduction of its original appearance or very close to it. So I think we're on the right track.
Right. Are there any other comments to be made? So I think also our standard talks about synthetic materials if they're going to be in an area of a lot of weathering. And I don't know, Matt, what your thinking was on that.
Yeah, I guess for the side, the front, that would require some, I don't know, I mean, AZEC is more or less flat, but I'm thinking I'm going to have to go down to Liberty Cedar or somebody and have them cut the right, what do you call it? Design,
Molding.
trim, whatever. So
Yeah,
I was thinking it's going to have to be wood.
right. So I think what we can do is, I think the materials that you're going to choose will be resilient materials. The wood, if you choose wood, cedar or something like that. We just want to make sure that our motion includes materials that are appropriate.
Yeah.
So I think with that, we may be ready to have a motion to give you a certificate of appropriateness to go ahead with the replacement in kind. So anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make that motion to
Can-
go forward with the in-kind materials as discussed.
All right, and we'll add to the motion that it's in accordance with our standard and guideline number 43, which says preserve original doors and doorway enframements, which this is, that contribute to the historical character. And that where materials are beyond that they need to be replaced, that replacement in kind is appropriate, as long as it matches the design character of the original. It's very simple. And I think we'd add to that the Matt choose durable materials, wooden materials for the replacement in kind.
Right. And
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
So we'll have a roll call, I think, on this, just because it's easier with Zoom. Karen?
Yes, approved. It's been a while.
Linda?
Approve.
Shantia?
Approve.
And Andrew?
Proof.
All right, and I vote aye. It's Richard.
I
Youngkin.
approve too.
Oh, sorry, Carolyn. It's
See?
because your face isn't here.
Yeah, see?
Oh dear.
Hmm,
Carolyn Griswold. Aye,
Approve.
right, approved. Okay. So I think we have 100% of the board. All ayes. Thank you, Matt, for all of this. And do you want to give us a little bit of a report on your progress with the other things? You're marching
Yeah.
along?
I am we're in winter, so there's some rot under the eaves.
Uh-oh.
And yeah, well, yeah. And so in spring, I think we're going to take that. That's going to need to be replaced.
Mhm.
And I have already a sample from Liberty Cedar that I had years and years ago. We replaced it, so they had the mold for it. They had to cut a mold, and so I'll be back on that one. I'm waiting on a piece for the porch. Also, I was able to replace the porch. Need to replace 2 rotting slats, but one of them we just temporarily replaced because it's the original is actually a little wider than the one. So they're there, but they're just hanging there. Well, I mean, they're tacked in, but they're there just so we're not going to do that. But instead of them, what's the normal 3.5-inch slats?
These are the
One
treads?
was 3.5, one's 4.5.
Are these
Treads, yeah,
treads
treads.
there? Yeah. Well,
I'm
we'll
sorry?
be watching to see how you progress. We know you're methodical. And thank you.
That's about done. Yeah, that's about done. And so I'll be back because the running around, the molding underneath the eave is going to happen. It's only on the corner, right on the edge. So I'll be back for that, and we'll have to figure out how to wrap that into.
Take some good
there.
pictures of it if you can when you come back.
Yeah, yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you. We're going to move on in our agenda.
Okay.
We have things to do.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Matt.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
So the next item under new business, actually, I don't know if we've got a revolving fund. Should we go back to that now that Jamie's here and talk to him about that?
Sure.
This was on our agenda before in September. And when Kayla Gray was here, she had brought to us a discussion that she was having with the town manager about the possibility of revolving loan fund, a development fund with revolving funds. And you're probably familiar with these.
Yes.
And she was saying at that point that there was some interest that the town manager had working perhaps with a nonprofit to get one of these funds started. I think they may have been thinking about Main Street, but they may have been thinking about housing too in other sections of the town, historic buildings. So we had set up a little committee, and Shantia's on it, and I'm on it, and I think some other folks are on it as well. Can't quite remember who, to follow up with whatever research we could have because of our connections with the National Trust and other organizations, including the 1772 Foundation. So we put it all in abeyance, thinking that we would hear from perhaps you or Brian about any continuing interest before we got ahead of ourselves, so to speak. So this is your opportunity to tell us if you still have any interest in this, if you'd like us to do any more research for you.
Yeah, I think, in other communities I've worked in, it's a great idea. It requires some legwork, which it appears you're willing to do. I've had some brief discussions with Rob regarding how you would manage or partake in the program. Would it be just for historic buildings? Would it be for facade treatment, entryway? How would you distribute the funds? Would there be a minimum or a maximum? Would there be a match? So I think it's a great idea. I think it gives an incentive to people to improve or keep up with maintenance they may have delayed a little bit due to some financial burdens. and gives them an opportunity and the commission an opportunity to promote the upkeep and maintenance of not just historic buildings, but building facades in general, which impact visitors' view of your community as well as the residents as you move around town. So I think it's a really good idea. So I applaud you for your efforts to date.
So I think we could, Shanti and I and anybody else on the commission who would like to participate, we could pull together separately and just, I think it's just if we can provide the planning staff with some case examples. There are quite a few of them that I'm aware of throughout the country that are really going ahead on multiple levels using the development funds. They're more commonly now called development funds rather than revolving funds, although the development funds revolve and get refinanced. But we could do that for you and pick out the ones that seem to be the juiciest that you could follow. If that would be helpful, we could do that.
It would be very helpful. While you've been talking about it, I've just been going back and looking through the historic district's computer files, and unless it's buried in a folder somewhere with a random name on it, I don't see that any work has been generated on this concept at this point. So we're really starting off from scratch. So anything that any of the members could find of examples from other communities would be very helpful in allowing us to be able to pull something together. And Jamie's indicated that he's familiar with the concept, so I'm sure he has some ideas on it as well, and we can start patching something together.
Well, very good. And I think I have a good thought about where to begin too with the list. That these would be when we get names and websites and URLs to connect with these other outfits pretty quickly.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm Jamie again. Yeah. One thing I would want you to think about too is there are kind of two approaches, and that's broad brush or targeted. So as you look at initiating this, keep in the back of your mind that are there specific areas in town that you feel need to be targeted, or is it more of a broad brush approach? And maybe it's simply on state routes or within Peacedale or Wakefield, or it's within Kingston proper by URI. So just, you want to see visible results, and sometimes that's with a targeted approach versus broad brush. But you also may limit yourself if it's targeted and you don't get buy-in from the people in your targeted areas. So
Right.
if you can help us with that, you're the residents.
One of the things that I have learned in my experience with the funding of these is that the grant makers are interested in, they may be more interested in specific projects. The story behind all of this does involve some meetings with the executive director of the 1772 Foundation and a grant proposal that was submitted for a feasibility study and through them. And it was not, it wasn't funded, but I think the interest was there, except they weren't considering a specific project to fund. It was it was kind of a funny cross between, if you're doing a feasibility study, would you have a specific project in mind, or would you just do a blanket kind of feasibility study? So there's something about that we can dig into a little deeper to find out exactly what happened and get some feedback. Does anybody else on the board have thoughts on this? Anything? I'm not hearing anything. Just a lot of heads moving.
Well, I think it's worth exploring, and I think Jamie makes an interesting distinction in terms of approaches, which I actually hadn't really given a lot of thought to. So I think that deserves some consideration, definitely, the approaches.
And I also think the area that you target, I thought that was interesting, what he just kind of talked about, Kingston from, major routes or roadways. So I think that's the other lever that would be interesting to focus on, is what would be most impactful.
Yeah. Very good. I think we've said enough, and we can move on now. Jamie, we've really finished all of our business, except we're down to new business. So we need to look at our annual meeting schedule, which is very perfunctory. It's sort of our requirement that we do have a meeting schedule. In the past, the Historic District Commission did not meet frequently. We actually are meeting more frequently than we have ever met, which is kind of a good thing. And but this agenda, this meeting schedule that we do have, and hopefully you've all been able to get a copy. Has everybody got a list of the dates? This is sort of the bare bones meeting schedule that we will have, and have these dates recorded. So do I have any thoughts from the board about these dates? Are these dates okay? Any thoughts about?
Yeah, Andrew already pointed out that the November meeting is actually the 4th and not the 5th, so I will make that correction.
Well, the Thursday? Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, they look good. But we usually fill in a lot more blanks.
Yes, yeah. And how about the time? Is the time, maybe it's probably a good idea to revisit that. Is this time working okay for you?
That works well for me.
It works for me.
It's great for me. I'm working remote.
Ah,
I'm working remote. Instead of getting home at 7 o'clock at night, I'm home all day.
well, that's a good thing. That's great.
But I'm stuck here all day, 7 in the morning until God knows when. So, but it's okay. I'll take it over the alternative.
How about you, Andrew? Is everything okay with the time?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine through the spring at least, because of the pandemic, I'll be probably at home on Thursdays, but when I get back to my regular 5-day-a-week commute, anything before 5:30 is problematic. So
Right. Yeah. And I think this time period, 5:30, was set up by Doug when he had to commute back up to Providence. And remember, he felt like he could stay, and it was a good thing to do, right? After he got out of his daily work at Town Hall, he could have the meeting. I imagine this is working for you, Brian, as well. Is this working for you well?
It's not a problem. I live in Narragansett, so I can leave work and come home. And, if we do go back to in-person meetings ever, it's not a problem. I can, I'll just stay at Town Hall until the meeting starts. Not a big deal.
Okay.
So the first Thursday of each month, right?
Correct.
Okay.
All right. So I think we'll just have a motion here to approve these dates and move forward. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll make a second.
All right. We'll do a roll call. Karen?
Yeah, that's fine. I approve.
You approve. All right. How about
Approve. Karen DeSilva, approve.
you do? Okay. Andrew?
approve.
Shantia?
Approve.
Linda?
Approve.
And I approve, Rich Duncan. So that takes care of all of us, I think. So the next item on the agenda is the comprehensive plan update. And I wondered if, now that Jamie's with us, if he could give us some ideas about that. They were interested in the historic preservation components, and there are quite a few of them actually.
Right.
So can you
So let
give
me
us just a
let
little
me
bit?
just
about
I'll fill you in real quick of where we are in the process. So the planning board at their work session made a motion to approve the plan as drafted. There are a few amendments that we have to handle to put a final staple in the document and move that along to the town council. So we hope to do that in the next 3 to 4 weeks and get that document to town council. Town council has to have a hearing, and then after the hearing, they can adopt, and then we still have to send it to the state in order for the state to approve it also. So there's a couple more processes associated with the final adoption formally by the town with a date and approval at the local and state level. With regards to historic preservation and historic districts, what I think the comp plan for the town gives us some guidance on is the potential development of some design guidelines for the community as a whole. Not primarily looking at single family residential, but looking at developing design guidelines for non-residential components, commercial, retail space, as well as multifamily housing, from potentially duplexes up to stacked flats to larger apartment buildings. And, doing that, building on the historic architecture and components that are within the community, whether you're in Green Hill or Matunic or Peacedale, and pulling kind of the things you're proud of and that are scalable into a design guideline to help developers understand what the expectations are of the community. So I think as we get into those phases, as we work through our work program with the planning board, that will probably reach out to you with your experience of working on the historical components of the community. I think your 40-page document is a well-done document. It was nice for me to do a Google Earth imagery at home, working with COVID, and then reinforce it with a drive-by in the last couple of days, and then refer back to your document. So it was easy for me to look at the geometry and the proportionality of the door and relate it back to a well-done document for design guidance, and then be able to advise you. Without a well-done document, sometimes you're taking a few shots in the dark
Right.
when you're trying to advise an applicant. So that's
Let's-
kind of where we are work program wise with the document.
Hmm.
I don't know if anyone has any specific questions.
Well, we do have some that are coming up, but I wondered if there were any other, in terms of the design review, the guidelines and standards, if any of the board members have an interest in that community-wide. I think it would be a really exciting project to get involved in. We have a lot of context, historical context that remains, and much of it isn't covered by the historic district, the zoning district. And I think people have felt from time to time that we've got a great sort of body of architecture to inspire us. It's vernacular, it's not high style. Some of it's very interesting, but it does convey what this community's character is all about. So any other comments from the board?
It's a long document, and to be honest, I haven't made my way all through it, but just getting as far as I did, I was struck by how often the term historic mill building comes up. And, in keeping what Jamie said about design guidelines, would think, this is, these are important assets to the character of our town and the historic nature. And, I think as a committee, we should have some opinions as to how they get developed, and not lose their character and integrity along the way. So, I would like to, think that we have some guidelines and standards along that type of uh, structure as well as residential. So I see there's a role for that.
Anybody else?
Yeah, and I too I didn't realize how large the document was, so I haven't gone through it. It's very comprehensive. There's so much detail here. The one thing that it's interesting, I'd never seen this depicted before, but I drove off to page 194, which is a map. And the map is cultural and historic resources. So it was very interesting to see, how they've identified scenic landscapes. The Kingston Historic District is identified there. But what struck me was this pink area that shows up multiple places on the map as National Register Historic Districts, and it seems broader than. So in my mind, what came to mind was Main Street, right, as a historic district. But this is broader than that. So I don't know how this came to be, but I mean, I think it's great, but I'm just interested how that came to be. That makes
Well,
sense?
I can talk to Carol Baker, our GIS person, because I'm sure she's the one who drew those maps. So she'll be the one who will be able to say where the data came from.
It's a big area.
I was going to add too that, and I think probably Jamie and Brian know this, but and all of us know this to some degree, that our historic resources survey work is so out of date. The book, I have a copy of it here I'm looking at. I don't know if you can see this, but it has a picture of the library on it.
Yes.
That one. This one dates from what, the 1980s and 1984, but the research that went into it is late 70s. So it's kind of time to, I think, to invest in updating these surveys. And that is referenced in the comprehensive plan, that it becomes important that we think also about our mid-century modern architecture and how really valuable it is. And Shantia is interested in that, and so am I. We have some very interesting things that were happening at the University of Rhode Island that drew in young professors from the West Coast and the Midwest and other locations. They got to, in the 1950s, they got to a place that was very stuck in a down spiral, and not much change was happening. It was sort of a colonial revival nest, and built these houses in Biscuit City and in Kingston and in Peacedale that, and in Matunic. Matunic had its own little tradition of mid-century modern. So these things they're sort of come up a little bit in the survey, but they were not really considered to be of much historical significance back then. They were only 30 years old. But now there's a whole new generation of people thinking that there's something here and there in the mid-century modern to think about carefully. So that's just one example of what's missing. And we would like to do more as a board, more encouraging survey work through the CLG process. And that is a source of funding that comes down through the State Historical Preservation Commission. that
And
we
it was
tapped into.
just announced, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a new round just opened.
And there'll be a new round every year.
Yeah.
So, but the survey type, the expertise, we were cultivating Erica Luke at the South County History Center. She did survey work for Main Street, for the Main Street enlargement. So we're just hoping that we can get more sort of going on that, because that becomes really it's the basic inventory for planning purposes for historic resources. And, it would be like you had a wetland survey that was, way, way out of date, or a
Well,
soil
Rich,
survey.
I mean, I think part of the, it's the conundrum of the other two issues we've talked about, a possible revolving fund plan and broader design guidelines. You can't really develop either of those initiatives effectively without knowing accurately what your community has for resources.
Right.
And I think, you're pointing out what we know, which is our survey's outdated.
Right. It's not that it isn't useful. It's just, it could be so much more useful if it was up to date.
I think the key in your analogy is with wetland soils. It's not that the wetland soils would be outdated, because wetland soils don't change. It would be that you only did 3/4 of the town. You're trying to create a development plan on the whole town. I think what you have is you have a bailiwick of historic resources and studies that you're feeling may not address the entire town in a comprehensive manner. It's missing something. You're talking about that mid-century modern, that California contemporary that moved here in the 70s, with 4-foot overhangs and 5-foot overhangs during the energy crisis to really shade the windows, which went from 12/12 to these plate glass systems that Peller and Marvin put in. I grew up in a California twist of a California contemporary where there's 40 feet of glass in 3 rooms that I grew up in. Normally in a Cape, in that 40 feet, you would have only seen 10 feet of glass, and only 2.5 feet at a time. Where you were seeing 10 and 20 feet at a time. Wasn't necessarily energy efficient, but I think it's not that you maybe need to redo a document, you need to add to a document.
Well, that's correct. And in terms of wetlands in particular, some have been filled in, some don't exist anymore, some are have been completely eutrophied, or if they're water bodies, eutrophication has taken place. So I think that change has occurred. We don't have, some of these resources don't exist anymore that are in this resources survey. They've been demolished, or they've been totally changed beyond recognition.
Yeah, you lost one of your grand mansions in the downtown.
Yeah, right. So we should move on. We don't want to take up too much more time. We're conscious of Brian and his schedule. All of us are getting hungry too, I'm sure. There are a couple more things though that are on our agenda that do relate to the plan, and one is that we did make a pitch for. This is an interesting idea, actually, that the town of South Kingstown, the town with a capital T, owns and manages some fabulous and monumental historic buildings that actually do require a considerable amount of effort and care. The stone buildings in Peacedale, for instance, the library, the office building, the neighborhood guild, the town hall. And then there are some landscapes that they own as well that have some significance. So I think it was a thought that we all had, that in the nature of trying to get people interested in community character and historic resources and context, why not have the town be a stellar steward, an incredible resource for the right way to do historic build, to take care of them, to maintain them, and to adapt them we're constantly, I think, thinking about how to make these buildings function better for ADA access, for energy efficiency, for just viability in the 21st century. So there are going to be projects coming along, probably on a continual basis, searching for appropriate upgrades. And why not have the town be in the lead on doing everything just the right way, the best way, the most innovative way, perhaps as well. And not to say that it hasn't been, but we sort of wanted to affirm that continual work. And what popped up, of course, was the work at the Peacedale Library, which is sort of in our face. All the painting, and I understand that there's been other work at the Hale Library, and maybe there's more work that we're going to be seeing coming forward. So we just wondered if anybody had any thoughts on that, if Jamie's really up to speed on it, and where does the work, how does the work sort of come through the town? Does it originate with the town manager's office? The libraries probably originate with the library board, but how does that all work? And is there a role, I'm getting into number D, is there a role for this commission to assist in any way we can, or not? It's just we just put it on the agenda. It's because the library is now right there and it's very visible. Everybody's seeing the work that's going on, and it's a whole sort of exterior rehab or paint job. And I think even the Daniel Chester French bas relief got some tidying up as well in the process. So we don't want to put you on the spot, Jamie, but maybe you have some comments on that.
Well, the way I'll handle that or speak to that fact is let me follow up with Rob Zarneski and completely understand the process. Typically it's handled by buildings and facilities and through either a maintenance or a capital improvement program. And it's probably an open discussion of, as they program these, are they honoring or respecting the historic nature of those structures, or is it done, based on financial resources? And there's a balance there between, if you had a trim feature, do you replace it with wood or do you replace it with AZEK, which is paintable? And if I paint the wood, the AZEK painted and the cedar painted are going to look very similar over time, but it's a maintenance choice. Right. So there's probably a balancing act there, but let me do a little more homework on that and get you a better response.
Terrific. Does anybody else have anything to say about that?
It's interesting, that we have a historic district commission. It's a topic on agenda, and but it would also be interesting for us to understand how that all comes to be. That it's just not that they are the stewards, and they do have onus on keeping up the properties that they've given. So it'd be great to have insight to that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it would be interesting to figure out also how that becomes a priority and in terms of value, in terms of the decision-making tree. I don't know how else to say it. I guess it's late in the day, but if it's not made a priority and a value, then they're buildings and grounds projects that people who don't know much about historic buildings take care of. And it seems to me that if it's a stated value that these buildings are important and need to be cared for in a particular way, then it becomes an opportunity for the Historic District Commission to be helping the town further the preservation of those buildings, somehow codifying that.
Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, we did manage to get that into the comprehensive plans, so there is some language in there to support an interaction on some level, and this notion that the town could actually be in a leading position to actually use it as an education for the townspeople on, gee, this is really the coolest way we could do this. It's the right way to do it. And, we're in a leadership role on it. And this is why we're doing it. And can we inspire other people to do the same with their buildings as a result? And it's sort of, the way the town, it is a small town still, even though its population is going up. There still is a lot of, I think, interface between people on Main Street, people in Town Hall, people who are doing the work, the construction business. And it can be kind of, I think, a very happy kind of interplay among people working toward, a goal. So anyway, it was a good thing that it was retained in the comprehensive plan. I was happy that it made it through all the editing process. So moving on, I think we got to get to the end of our agenda. Number 6E is about our annual awards. And gee, we had a good time with this, didn't we? Before COVID. So just taking sort of a poll of all you guys, do you feel like we should continue with this somehow and find a way? Any thoughts?
Well, I didn't even know that the Historic District Commission did this, honestly. And I've been here for 20 years and I work in the field. So I'm not quite sure how I never knew it, but apparently didn't even make it onto my radar. That's my only comment right now. Sorry.
Well, maybe Karen can give us some insight into, because I know Karen was really involved in this.
Yeah, I think we've only done it once, Shantia. So,
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah,
that's
right.
helpful.
And so, we kind of just made some nominations, and we had some discussions from a residential property to a commercial property, and we only handed out, I think it was 3, if I remember my record.
When was this?
This was probably last spring, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it just started. Oh, okay.
And we wanted to notify the paper, and we kind of recognized them in a letter, took a photo in the newspaper in front of the town hall. And so it was just a little bit of an organic program, or award that we gave out.
It was very low key, and it wasn't all about Kingston.
Right.
In fact, did we give any awards in Kingston? I
We
can't remember.
recognized Stedman's.
Yes, didn't we give Clarkson call?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, Robin,
Yeah.
we did.
Yeah.
So that,
And Stedman's, we did Stedman's and Arnold builders.
yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good
And
memory, Carol.
I had the good vibes when we were with the bicycle, I call it Bicycle Bill. When we were at Stedman's. In fact, that's where I got my first bicycle, I think.
Yep.
But that was fabulous. And also with the Arnold's lumber, and the story about Arnold's lumber, their inspiration from a postcard that somebody sent them was such a rich story. So I think that all in all, it was we had a good time. It was good in terms of getting us sort of away from that insular sort of Kingston kind of habitat. That people put us in that box all the time, and it's totally understandable. But and rewarding people who are doing stuff in Wakefield, it can be far spread. It could be anywhere in town. People could on the commission, all of you could think about properties that are being transformed, have been transformed recently. I think they have to be sort of fairly recent. And I think in thinking about it, I don't think these things have to be purist examples of, restoration, expensive restoration projects.
And we talked about the Matunic property that Jim had worked on, remember? And And that property owner did not want to be part of the,
Right.
any award. He just wanted to remain low key.
There's that. What comes to my mind is, if you've seen it on Columbia Street, it's now painted sort of a blue, darker blue with white trim. So little Gothic.
Yeah, they're
Revival
doing some good
Cottage.
work there. Yep.
Very interesting. I mean, one of those places, small, vernacular, intact, could have been demoed, could have been altered beyond recognition so easily, and yet they took the time to. And there are several properties now on Columbia Street that are getting more interest. And I was over on Mechanic Street. I think Mechanic Street's a wonderful street.
Yeah.
I really do. And it
Yeah.
has these wonderful vernacular hazard. Roland Hazard actually came out with a design that's this 1.5 story with a wing, porch wing, gable to the street. They're everywhere in town, but that street has a lot of them for some reason. Mechanic Street, maybe that's why. Maybe there's a reason. But they were designed for families that worked in the mill, single family housing. So I think if you go street by street, you will find some wonderful things happening. And maybe the awards maybe we could make an award to a whole street of people who are, doing great work and are inspired by each other. You can sort of get the sense that that's happening. And we don't have to be seen as purists either. That keeps going around in my mind, that even the projects that, maybe you wouldn't have done it that way. If we followed our standards and guidelines, it wouldn't have come out quite that way. But at least something's been done, and they've done, like 80% or 85% in a good way.
So I think we should do it again.
I am going to have to jump
Sign
out
off.
here. So I don't know if you want to wind up the meeting, but I have to start pulling things together for the 7 o'clock meeting that I have to attend.
I think we're there. I think if everybody's good about awards, just think about it. We'll get clearer. Maybe the next meeting. Think about, ideas, how to proceed with that. And we've really hit our agenda. We're ready. So
I'll make a motion to conclude the Historic District Commission meeting of November 5th, 2020.
Second.
I second.
Oh,
Yes.
anxious to go.
All right. So we're adjourned. And thank you again, Carolyn Griswold.
I'll be in touch anyway.
You'll be in touch. You're not
With you, Rich. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And Jim
Thank you,
said the same
Carolyn.
thing.
Thank
Jim is-
you. Good luck
All
with
right.
your
Have-
Bye,
puppy.
Carolyn.
Oh, thank you. She's just rising from a nap, so she's going to need to go out.